Okay, so I think we can go ahead and get started. Everyone, thank you for coming to the Dallas Literary Festival and to our session, An Exploration of Race and Class, this conversation with Nancy Johnson about her debut novel, The Kindest Lie. First, I'd like to do a short introduction of Nancy. Um, a native of Chicago's South Side, her debut novel has been reviewed by the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Los Angeles Times, and is featured on Entertainment Weekly's Must List. It's been named one of the most anticipated books of 2021 by Newsweek, the Oprah Magazine, Shondaland, NBC News, Marie Claire, Elle, the Tribune, Chicago Tribune, the New York Post, Good Housekeeping, Parade, Refinery 29, and more. Booksellers nationwide selected her novel as an indie next pick, and librarians chose it for library reads. Nancy's work has also been published in Real Simple and the Oprah Magazine, and has received support from from the Hurston Wright Foundation, Tin House, and Combilio Fiction. So that's our Nancy. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you, Zuri. It's really good to be here, and thanks to everybody for coming out.
Yes, so I've been really excited about this conversation. I've been reading and rereading just so I'm on top of everything with the novel, and I wanted to really start by asking you what was your inspiration for writing this novel?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Zuri. I was inspired by the events of 2008 when Barack Obama was elected president. It was a bittersweet time for me. My father was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer that year, and he was really intent on voting, as he always was, but it was even more important because of the historic nature of that particular election. And I remember him being in the hospital in October of 2008. And you know how the doctors check in on you to see how lucid you are. Like, what's the day of the week? What month are we in? And the doctor asked my father, who's the president of the United States? And in this croaky voice, he said, Barack Obama. And the doctor said, not yet, not yet, because it was still October. But I didn't know what condition he would be in by election day. So I convinced him and my mom to both vote early, which they did. And so, as I often say, my father is a man who survived World War II and the Great Depression and Jim Crow, and cast the last vote of his life for America's first Black president. And it was a time, of such great hope, even though we were going through so much as a family, but also I think hope for so many, particularly in the Black community. And I think no matter what your racial background or your political persuasion was, people felt that we had achieved something significant and transcended a barrier. But at the same time, I was hearing from folks that we are now post-racial because we've got a Black president. And I knew that was not the case. And there was still so much ugly, naked racism playing out on my social media feed and everywhere else. And so I was interested in exploring Black and white America at that particular time of economic anxiety. And I wanted to know, where are they coming from? I understood much of the Black world, being Black. But then you also had some of the white working class community saying, you just don't hear us or understand us. And so that's why I created the characters of Ruth and Midnight to tell this particular story. But at its heart, it's a story about a woman named Ruth who is basically, she has a big secret. She gave birth to a baby when she was just a teenager. She left him behind in the dying Indiana factory town where she grew up. She goes back to search for him. And when she gets there, she meets and forms this unlikely friendship with a poor young white boy nicknamed Midnight. And he's adrift and searching for his own sense of family connection. And the two of them are on this collision course of race and class.
So it's very interesting that you went into talking about those two characters, well, the main characters, I guess. But I wondered, who was your intended audience? So, and before you answer, so I think about, they're very different. They obviously age difference and obviously different races, but they come from the same place. But I wondered, because there were so many specific cultural references and I want to say especially in the first chapter, there were
Yeah.
so many specific cultural references. Who was your intended audience, or did you even have an intended audience?
Yeah, I mean, really, it was for everybody. It was, and I know that sounds odd to say, oh, this book is for everybody, but in a way, it is. It's no matter what your race was. I think you can pull something from this. And one of the reasons I wrote the book is I wanted people to experience life in the eyes and through the lens of people they don't know. And so if you're Black and reading it, you are going to pick up on the cultural references and, the points about hair and the bacon drippings on the back of the stove, even though I've had a reader, who told me her grandmother was Belgian and she could connect because her Belgian grandmother has bacon drippings on the back of the stove. So there are all these cultural references that you're going to identify with if you're Black. But then I think if you're not Black and you read it, and if you don't understand, you can always look it up, or you still understand the story. But I think for white America, a lot of them are understanding parts about the Black experience. This isn't the total Black experience, of course, but they're understanding a piece of the Black experience when they read the book. And I think that's important in terms of bridging understanding and helping us with some of these problems we're having with race. And America is really experiencing life through the eyes and lens of somebody else. So it's really for both to understand. I think if you're Black, you still need to understand, if we're going to ever, have any bridging and any common ground, understand what white America, and it's really kind of that Trumpian white America that you still had back in 2008. And I think we need to understand where they're coming from too.
Yeah, and so even though this novel is set in 2008, it could very well be 2020 or 2021, especially with what we're going through with the pandemic and and everything else that's happening right now. And
Mhm.
I think what we could do now is if you could, I think that takes us as a good segue into what you have promised to read for us today.
Yes, I did promise. And so this is a scene between my main character, Ruth, who's a chemical engineer and very successful Yale educated engineer, and her brother, Eli, who has worked at the auto plant in her hometown. And he has just lost his job, because we're in 2008, the Great Recession. So a lot of the plants were closing at that time, if you'll recall. Frustration clouded his face. Oh, I'm sorry, they're at the bar. Ruth and Eli are at the bar right now. Frustration clouded his face, resignation pressing his shoulders until they slumped. The same set of grandparents had raised them both in the same house. The same Ganton schools educated her and Eli, and yet her flower bloomed while his never made it beyond a bud. You have to reframe your thinking. Even if you don't meet every requirement, walk into those interviews like you're at the spades table about to run a Boston on everybody. You need a winner's mindset. He laughed. You must have learned that shit in college. Psychology, right? Some book about 100 ways to get inside the mind of a broke brother. Am I right? The bottle of Bud swung in Eli's hand when he talked. Ruth threw up both hands in surrender, hoping he'd see she had come in peace. Look, I'm sick of you feeling sorry for yourself. You're not the only one with problems. I haven't told anyone this, but there's a guy on my job that I trained, and now he's getting better high-profile assignments. Damn, them white people be tripping. Sorry about that, sis, but at least you still got a job. How are you so sure they're white? Eli twisted his mouth into a smirk as if he didn't need any confirmation. Her eye roll must have told him he'd guessed correctly. Hey, Eli, what's good, little bit? Do you ever feel like life is getting ahead of you? Like you can't control what happens anymore? I mean, it's your life, but somebody else is pulling the puppet strings. Nothing is the way it used to be or the way it should be. She knew she wasn't making much sense, not even to herself. Her thoughts jumbled in her head. Eli glanced at his phone. I know where I should be right now, on the plant floor, the smell of hot steel all around me, all those machines coming alive in my hands, just like a good woman. I can still hear the buzzing and the other sounds in my head. Sometimes they wake me up in the middle of the night. It's like they're teasing me, Even the memory of the plant made his face glow, and then that flame was extinguished just as fast. Ruth ached for her brother to regain everything he'd lost. Cassie should be by your side through this thing. She's your wife, the mother of your children. One thing I can say about Mama is that she stuck by Papa when he got sick. She hung in there till the end. Eli took a swig of his beer. Mama's a soldier, man, ride or die. Now, Cassie, she took it real good in the beginning, rubbing my face, whispering sweet words in my ear. You know how y'all women do. talking about how she loves me more than biscuits and gravy and would always be my husband no matter what, be her husband no matter what. That's what she said until the bill collector started calling. Then I started smelling some other brother's sweat on her. I didn't know, Ruth said, her hands tightening around her bottle. She thought about Xavier and how she'd really handle it if he got demoted at his company or worse, let go. You like to think you know yourself and those closest to you, but you don't until you're tested. Like I told Cassie, she saw my lack, not my love. Then she had the nerve to try to keep my kids from me. Eli smashed a peanut shell in his fist and his whole body shook as if to shed the memory. He'd never opened up to her like this before, but then again, she'd been a kid most of the years they'd spent together. Men kept their hurt tucked away deep on the inside. If it rose high enough to spill out of them, they ran it off on the basketball court, drowned it in a bottle, or buried it deep inside a woman, but they rarely talked it out.
Thank you so much for reading that. I love that. I love hearing it from you, since you're the author. But I think about two different things when you read that. So I think about the fact that, Ruth is gone. She left and she's just, back visiting. And in a lot of ways, she is still stuck. It seems like she's still stuck with the idea of what, her hometown used to be when everyone else has moved on. But at the same time, it seems like everyone in the hometown is stuck in, whatever time warp, they're in. But the other thing is, how were you able to write this Black man? I think, and I think about August Wilson. I think August Wilson wrote, and I don't know if you're an August Wilson fan, but he wrote women wonderfully. He was able to just put women on the page like perfectly. And I think that, and I mean, I've never been a man or a Black man before, but I just feel like you just wrote that really well. How are you able to write a Black man?
Yeah, I don't know, but I found, this is my first book, but I found that I do enjoy writing male characters, even more so than the female ones. And Eli, I'm glad you picked up on all that with Eli, because he was my favorite character to write, even though he was a secondary character. And, it was really Ruth and Midnight's story, but I love the character of Eli. And I think it's just about, somebody asked me this question the other day about, in a book club, about, do you have to kind of divorce yourself in a way, become the character? And that's true. I do. When I'm writing a character in a particular scene, I try not to think about the others. So I'm not thinking about Ruth. I'm not thinking about Midnight or Mama. I'm thinking about about Eli in the moment, trying to understand what is it like to be this man. And also when I come up with one piece about him, okay, he's frustrated because he lost his job. Mm-hmm. That's only one element of who he is. I want him and all my characters, I want them to be complex. So that's not all he is. He's not just a man who's out of work, an auto worker, He's also, a husband. He's a father. He's a brother, And so I wanted to show some of those tender moments. I wanted to show him being protective of his family, And I think the other piece is, reason I think that I took so much care with him is, I used to work as a journalist, and there were so many negative perceptions of Black men in the media. Some people only know a Black man in a perp walk, who's, about to be arrested has been arrested for something and being brought into the police station. And there are so many types of Black men who are out there, and so many good Black men. And when I talk to book clubs, even mainly the predominantly white book clubs, some of them are shocked and surprised that, oh, this is a man, kind of a family man here, and he's Black. And like, of course, pretty much every man I know is, a good family man. And so I wanted to make sure that we had that representation, because I think how we are represented on the page impacts so much of our lives.
So, and that's interesting that you bring that up too. So I wanted to ask, so this is a fictional account, obviously,
Yes.
Not obviously, but it's a fictional account. Do you feel like you have some responsibility, as an author now that you're out there, do you feel like you have some responsibility um, to show that to the world, to the world, to the community? Do you have some responsibility to show race and class in your
Yes, 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 I really do. And I wrestle with it a lot when I first started writing the book. Like, I felt the weight of responsibility when I wrote the first word. You know, when I started on the journey, I felt this weight, particularly being a Black author, that I want to represent my community well, you know, because I know how important that representation is. So that was always weighing on me. I think at some point it can become paralyzing, though. And I remember going to a book event in Chicago where I live, and Britt Bennett, the author of The
yeah,
Mothers of the Vanishing Half,
yeah,
uh, you know, was doing a book event. She didn't know me, you know, from Adam, but I asked a question in there about how she dealt with the very same thing you just asked me about. And she had said the same thing, that she wrestled with it at first, but it was about creating characters that are complex, you know, and that this is unique to this character that she's created, and that's how she doesn't worry about it, because it's not like that one character represents all Black people, because that can't be, you
right.
know, and that takes the pressure off of it. And so that's what I tried to do, make my characters complex, multidimensional. But I admit I worried about it because Ruth was a teenage mother. And am I, you know, perpetuating this image of Black women, you know, Black girls as, you know, teenage moms? I worried about it with Eli. You know, he's out of work and he doesn't have his kids with him. And, you know, is he a deadbeat dad? And is that going to be the perception? But that's why I wanted to make everybody complex and fully rounded, so that it would be, this is not, when you read The Kindest Lie, it is not the definitive word on what it means to be Black in America. It's only, you know, one or two, you know, a few experiences of Blackness in America. But there's definitely that. You know, I look at the comments and you know, the responses from Black readers. I think those are more meaningful to me. And when Black readers say they connect with the story, then that matters a lot to me, because I really do want Black readers to also see themselves reflected on the page. I didn't always have that growing up. You know, as a kid, I loved Nancy Drew, and I loved Beverly Cleary books. She just
Right,
passed, you
right,
know, yeah, may she rest in peace. And Julie Bloom and those. I mean, I grew up on all those books, and you didn't see Black
right,
people represented in those books. And I didn't realize it at the time. I just thought, oh, I
right.
love those books. It didn't dawn on me until much later. And now that I'm writing books, I'm very conscious of it, making sure that people can see themselves represented.
And it's interesting too that, you know, you said, you know, you worked with in you were a newscaster.
Mhm.
So you are very cognizant of how Black people or people in general are portrayed. And I appreciate that. I think we appreciate that you want to show us the full person, a whole person.
Yeah, and you talked about that first chapter. That's the opening scene for people who haven't read, is election night for Barack Obama, and Ruth and her husband are having this election night party, and there are all these references. There are a lot of cultural references there, and there are things with hair and all kinds of cultural things. And I've had Black people who've read it say, I felt so seen
Mm.
there, you know, like that was me. And I, you know, and I love to hear that kind of feedback, that people can say, yeah, I see myself. It's wonderful.
Nice. So let me just pause for a second to say, if you have any questions, feel free to put your questions in the chat, but I still have questions, so we're going to keep going. Um, how about so as far as your characters, do you have any, so as a reader, I feel very connected to a couple of your characters. Do
Oh,
you feel any
which
connection?
ones?
So, so I loved Eli,
Yeah.
and I love, I think I love Midnight, even though, you know, at some point I wanted to whoop him, but like I love Midnight. Will we see any of those characters again in future projects?
Oh, yeah, I get that question a lot. I think when people enjoy a book, they want a sequel. And so that's really a compliment. And I definitely take it as one. At this point, I don't have any plans to continue
Oh,
with
come on.
these characters. You're like, come on. I don't have any plans to, but I've had people, even I work a day job in corporate communications, and my CEO Zoomed with me a few weeks ago, and he had this whole thing planned out of where he thinks the story could go, you know, next. And I won't say what he said because it would give away the ending, but he had a lot of ideas about that. So people do imagine, and I think that's the way you want to write a book, is you want to end it. I try to end The Kindest Lie with a feeling of ambiguity, where you don't know exactly where things could go. But yet it's also a feeling that, oh yeah, that's the way it was supposed to be, And so there's a kind of that combination of the two. And so you can kind of imagine where you think these characters might go next. I would say the only way that these characters would still have more life would be if, hopefully someday, there were to be like a TV or a film, with The Kindest Lie. Then you could see where the story goes from there. But in terms of what I'm doing, no. I have a new novel, though. I don't know if you want to talk about that now or wait, but I have a new novel in the works.
You're here to do it now.
Okay, yeah. So it just got announced about a week ago, a new book deal was also with William Morrow, HarperCollins. I sold my next book to them, which I still have to write. So there's a lot of work ahead for me, but it's called People of Means. And it is a book set in dual timeline, 1960 and 1992. And it tells the story of a Black mother and daughter, both of them coming of age at different national moments of racial reckoning. And the mother is coming of age in 1960 in Nashville as a student at Fisk University during the Civil Rights Movement. And then her daughter in 1992 in Chicago, but very much influenced by the events in Los Angeles with the acquittal of the 4 officers who beat Rodney King.
Very nice, and I can't wait.
Yeah, probably 2023, I think, is when that one will be out.
Very nice. So again, and speaking about your characters, so even though he wasn't, present in the novel Papa, he was very much present. So he has talk about Papa and his presence.
Yeah. So Ruth's grandfather is Papa, and in the course of the book, he has already died. And but like you said, Zuri, he's definitely ever present. He's larger than life in many ways, for her and for Mama and for Eli. And I think I will say that's probably part of my life story being in the book, with having lost my father, him dying in 2008. And so my father wasn't around for me to, even though I wrote a novel. But it's interesting when you lose someone, a parent, grandparent, someone who's that close to you, a lot of times they become larger than life in memory. And that's what I have happening with Ruth, is that she imagines him as being this hero, he can do no wrong. And she just has this perception of him. And so much of what she remembers about her life when she goes back to her hometown is about the experience with him. She remembers fishing with him along the river and her hand in his larger hand. She remembers him. The other thing about him that's different, back then, is that he was more of a company man. He worked at the auto plant and he was very proud of that. And I don't know if you see that same level of pride with those of us today with our work, but for him, it meant something to wear that cap that had the logo of the company, the auto plant company, on it.
Yeah,
and he wore that.
Anything.
Right. I don't wear anything from my organization around, on the street on the weekend, like, let me represent. But but he was always representing, and she remembers him putting that cap on her head and it didn't fit and it falls down over her eyes. And so, I think he's somebody who kind of represents an era gone by, in terms of the work ethic and the, like I said, being a company man at a plant like that. And also he just represents, the love and everything that really held that family together. And I think they struggled a bit when they lost him.
Yeah. If not financially, but like they even struggled. Obviously, I mean, of
That's
course.
what I meant. I didn't even mean financially. I meant, emotionally, it was just difficult because Mama had to hold everything together on her own. And I think losing him, it not only impacted them financially, but it also just impacted how everything was on her shoulders now. I got to make sure these grandkids are going to be okay. And so we see, some of the things, the choices she made,
Yeah.
questionable choices she made
Yes.
because of that.
Yeah, and that's where I was going next.
Okay.
So let's talk about sacrifice.
Mm.
Um, so Mama basically like her life, her relationship, can I say that she loses in my opinion, I think she loses her relationship and is maybe not okay with it, but content with it because it betters her life. It betters Ruth's life. So the
Mhm.
sacrifices that Mama made, um, she may not have been okay with it, but because it bettered Ruth's life, she had to be okay with it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about sacrifice in the novel.
Yeah. I think that's definitely a theme throughout is sacrifice. And I think the character of Mama is the one who I do believe, like you're saying, made the greatest sacrifices throughout the book. I don't want to give away too much of what her
Right,
sacrifices were
right,
because those would be spoilers, but I think the things that she did, everything she did was out of love. And that's why I call the book The Kindest Lie too, because of, people tell lies, they keep secrets for the best of intentions and to protect the people they love. And that's what she did. She definitely sacrificed for her grandchildren. And I don't think they understood that, until much later in the novel, what everything she had done and why she had done it. And I think that's the way it is often. We're living our lives as the children of the grandchildren, but we don't know what sacrifices the people who've come before us have made. We only know what's here and now for us, and that's the only way we think of it. And also, the other interesting thing is I think we only, at least a lot of us, only think of our mothers and grandmothers in connection to us, their relationship, being mothers and grandmothers. And we don't always see them as full human beings.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, they've got lives of their own. And I don't think Ruth understands Mama in that context until she goes back and really begins to learn more that Mama had some dreams of her own. She's got a life of her own. And she had things that she wanted for herself. And of course, I think she transfers some of that onto her granddaughter, though, that, some of her unfulfilled dreams. But also with sacrifice, we see Ruth making sacrifices as well, going back, you know, uh, to going to Chicago, leaving her hometown. That was, a sacrifice, leaving her child behind, even though she felt compelled to do it, but she was also sacrificing to make that happen.
Yeah, so and I don't want to I don't want to talk more about that because I feel like that would give things away. Um so I have one more and then we have some things so I wanted to talk more about the title and you said that was why that's where the title comes from, but I
Right,
feel
right.
like there are so many lies in the novel, but just a little bit more about the title.
Yeah. I think the title it's interesting with the title. I was starting with another title. I originally had the title Until Midnight. And I went to a writing workshop with the crime fiction author Laura Lippman. And she said to me, you don't ever want to use the name of a character to support your title, or to reinforce your title. And so I had never thought about that. So I changed it when that happened. And so then from there, this next title that I came up with was The Kindest Lie. And I didn't know if that was going to stick or not, but it did. And it was really about understanding the sacrifices and like I said, the lies that people tell, the secrets that they keep to protect the ones that they love. And, and you just see that throughout the book. And it's also on a macro level too. I'm also talking about the lies that America has told itself as well, about how honorable and decent it is to marginalize people when it has not been.
Very nice. So I wanted to move on to, we have one question from the audience. Sue Harshman asks, how do you juggle your day job with your writing time?
Yeah, that's been a struggle. I'm actually going through that right now because I'm still working a day job. And even though I'm working from home, which is nice, and so I don't have the long commute, but it's a struggle because I'm now promoting The Kindest Lie. I'm writing on a new book and doing the day job. So I'm still trying to figure out that balance personally right now. But when I wrote The Kindest Lie, I was working a day full-time, demanding day job in corporate communications, and I had a long commute. So I had a 3-hour total commute, so an hour and a half each way, and it was a driving commute. So I couldn't write when I was, going to work or coming home from work. And it's so interesting that as I was writing that book, I'd be driving on the interstate, and that's when the best ideas would inevitably come to me. Ideas for dialogue or exposition would come to me then, and I would say, oh, I'll remember that when I get to work. Of course, when I would get to work, I forgot it. I didn't remember a thing. So then what I started doing was using my phone and using the voice memo function on my phone. And then I would just, as I was driving, I would talk into the phone when an idea would hit me. And so that was so helpful. So then that way I captured it. But even then, when I would get home at night, I'd be tired, but I had an accountability partner in California. So I'd get home from work around 6 in the evening, and at 6:30, she would call me and we would talk for a few minutes about what we planned to do with our writing. And then we would hang up and write for 2 hours. And then after that, we would, after writing for 2 hours, I would call her and we would say, here's what I accomplished.
Nice.
And so that accountability just made all the difference in terms of trying to write. And now that I'm, got this new book to write, I'm part of another accountability trio with 2 other published authors. And we've all got books that we're working on and are in the same step, in our journey. And so we talk every Sunday and, about what we're doing, and that keeps me motivated.
That's nice. I was so when I would be writing things too, I would use the voice memo thing, and I usually get inspiration either when I'm at an event, like someone's reading, or some spoken word event, I would get inspiration, or even like on the airplane, I'd be making voice memos, or waking up in the middle of the night to just record some things. I'm not writing anything in the middle of the night. I would use the voice memo feature too. So nice. Yeah. Look, I'm on the right track.
You are on the right track. It helps a lot. Yeah, because it's easy to forget.
Okay, so we have a question about a character. Anonymous asks, do you have a favorite character? I think I know this answer.
Yeah. So my favorite character, like I mentioned before, was Eli. And so I really loved, just crafting his character. And the one interesting thing, I think I was able to get into his head even more and develop him even more, because in my first 2 drafts of the book, I not only had Ruth and Mama as the point of view characters, I also had Eli and Mama. In addition to Ruth and Midnight, I should say, I had Eli and Mama. So I was telling the story from their points of view. Mm-hmm. But then I had some literary agents, read the book, and they said, it needs to be more focused. And so just focus on your main 2 characters, which were Ruth and Midnight. But because I'd done all that extra work and those other 2 full drafts of the novel, I knew Eli really well. And I knew Mama really well. And so I was able to, I think, really understand them well enough that when you read it and you learn who they are through Ruth's perspective, you get to know them really well, because I got to know them so well in earlier drafts of the book.
So you talked about an agent. So talk to us about your path to publishing.
Yeah. It was, it's a circuitous path. And so, I used to be a journalist. I've always been a writer and a storyteller, but it's very different than writing a novel, so I knew I had to learn how to do that. And so I started going to writing workshops. That's how I met Sandria Smith, who's the coordinator of this entire Dallas Literary Festival, as I met her at an event at Eckerd College Writers in Paradise. It's in St. Petersburg, Florida. And, it's like not the first, it's sometime in January, for like a week in January. And you go there and you study with well-known published authors. It was founded by Dennis Lehane. And I studied there with Laura Lippman and Ann Hood. So all these really top-notch, well-known authors that I worked with. And then you workshop an excerpt of your book with other students in the class with you. And I used to, for years, I confess that I would go, you have to apply to get in, submit 25 pages. Mm-hmm. And so I went the first year and I workshopped 25 pages. Then I didn't do another thing until it was time to try to get in for the next time. And I wrote another 25 pages. So I did that 3 years in a row. I wasn't really serious yet about doing it. I think you have to figure out when you're really serious and you're ready, and then you'll do it. Because I had another author, Lori Rader Day, tell me if you write 60 pages of a book, Sandria is saying, yeah, it's an excellent conference. It really is. But anyway, Lori Rader Day told me if you get to 60 pages, you'll probably keep going. And so that was in my head then. So I was like, okay, I got to 60. And at that point, I was like, yeah, it's true. I've written enough now that I'm not going to turn back. I'm going to keep going with this. And so that's what I did. But then you always think your book is ready before it's really ready. And so I started querying literary agents. I had just gotten feedback on the full manuscript from Caroline Levitt, who is also a really well-known best-selling author. And she gave me great feedback. I made those revisions, and then I started querying literary agents. And those are the gatekeepers, as people know, I think, to getting you into the publishing world for traditional publishing. And so all the rejections started flooding in immediately. I was rejected by so many agents. And one of them was Danielle Bukowski of Sterling Lord Literaristic. I sent her a thank you note, and she said, and she also gave me some feedback too. So I was getting some feedback from agents, which was good sign. She said, if you decide to revise it, let me know or send me your new manuscript. So I said, sure, I will. Fast forward, that was 2017, fast forward to 2019. Not only did I revise based on agent feedback, I had 5 beta readers, writers who read the full book, gave me feedback. I did more conferences. I did Kimbilio fiction, and I did Tin House, and also workshop at those places too. Rewrote the book several times based upon that feedback. Then I queried agents again. This time I got an offer from Danielle Bukowski and another agent. And so I had a choice, and I chose Danielle, who's now my agent. And then after that, the process was quick, lo and behold. And I we were on submission with my book to publishing houses only 2.5 weeks when we got 2 offers from imprints or divisions of HarperCollins. And I chose to go with William Morrow. And then the editing and that process didn't change after that. It was like I still had to revise more with my editor. I got my first editorial letter was 6 pages, single spaced, mind you. And so I made those revisions. After that, the next letter was 4 pages and then 2 pages. So I knew I was really improving the book. And so, yeah, then you've got copy editing. So it's like the editing and the revising just seems to go on and on. But everything is about making the book the very best that it can be.
Yeah, so I know that revision can be difficult, especially, reading and rereading your own work. So you're a prime example that perseverance is key.
Yeah, and you want to get other eyes for other writers out there. I'm sure there are other writers in the audience. You always want to get other people's eyes on your book. You think, oh, I can write. And I mean, when I say other eyes, I don't mean your mother, or your best friend. I mean, other people who can be objective and point out what's wrong, and do these workshops where you can evaluate other people's work, because that's where you often improve your own work. Because if I can find plot holes in somebody else's work, or say, oh, I see where they could have built some more suspense in there, then I can more easily see it where I have the same holes and missteps in my own work.
Very nice. So another question, this is about agents and editors. So did you have any difficulty with them getting your work, since your protagonist is a successful Black woman?
Yes. So, well, I'm not saying yes, I had problems, but I'm saying I understand that because publishing is white, and I was a Black author going into it. I didn't know how it was going to work out. So my editor at William Morrow is a white woman, and we have a great relationship. But I will say that when she sent me I told you about that first letter with 6 pages, single space, she did have some questions in there about some of those Black cultural references you were talking about, Zuri. Yes. So like, for example, one of them was where I talked about my main character, Ruth. I said she untwisted her hair and breathed in avocado and coconut and promise. And so it's about the Black hair, which is very, political for us. Black hair means something. And then, especially if you're wearing it natural. And then, so there was that piece, and also the promise of, the new president. And so I was thinking she was breathing in all those things. And my editor suggested, well, why don't you, instead of her breathing that in, she's just moved into her new home. Maybe she's breathing in the smell of fresh paint. And so I said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do this other. And, but there were several of those kind of more cultural references, questions about, a lot of it's about hair, the kitchen. What does that mean? Like, what's going on with the kitchen, And so when I met with her, on the phone for the first time to talk about the editorial letter, I was nervous going into it just because of some of those cultural differences. And I knew before we could even talk about plot or the things she wanted me to work on with suspense or character, deepening characterization, I had to address those more cultural pieces first, because I had my little list of things to talk about. And so I did that off the top, otherwise I would lose my nerve. And I wanted to make sure she understood where I was coming from with those. And she was great about it. Once we had a conversation, she's like, oh, okay, I just didn't understand what those things meant. She wasn't saying, you got to cut that out, but
Yeah.
she just needed to understand. And so there was educating, and I think that's part of the process. And so we built trust over time. And I'd say later on, I had something that the copy editor then asked about. I don't think this is necessarily a Black thing, but it was more of a colloquialism. I said something about Ruth when she was talking about her husband when she first met him, and she didn't know if he had other girlfriends. And he was like, oh no, I don't have anybody else. And she said something about him acting brand new. And the copy editor, a white male copy editor, said, oh, why don't we just say innocent here? And it was he was acting innocently, and then my white editor jumped in before I could and said, no, we're keeping brand new. It's clear from the context, so it was little things like that, once she got educated on it, she knew. She started asking me about, oh, you mentioned old heads, tell me about that. And I explained the term old heads, and, and she was like, oh, that's really cool. And yeah, so she's fine now, and we've built trust.
It's interesting because some of those things, and maybe some of those things I didn't even think were cultural references, but when you talk to someone who absolutely does not understand,
yeah, then it is like brand new. I don't think that's necessarily, I don't know if that's a Black thing. I don't know what that is, but acting brand new. But
and it's nice
it's the
too
slang.
that you have these people who are open-minded enough to want to be educated, enough to understand that that's awesome, and it's good to know.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask about, so I know that, when you're writing a book, there's a whole lot of behind the scenes things that are happening. So, we weren't introduced to it until, well, I won't say I wasn't introduced until a couple weeks before it debuted. But I wonder, where was the book last summer? With all the tumultuousness that was happening in the world. Not
I'm trying to remember. Yeah, last summer, I think we probably were still doing some of those edits, still going through some of those more final edits. Not the major edits, but I think maybe some of those more copy edits, some of that around there. We were beginning to introduce the book, the cover design, those kinds of things. I was coming up with book club questions at that time period. And it's interesting when all that happened, so the book was already written. But I remember talking to my team at William Morrow, that's my publisher at HarperCollins, and, discussing with my editor and my publicist. And I know this sounds a little crass, and I don't mean it to be crass, but we were wishing that the book, the timing had worked out better, when that whole George Floyd murder happened, that he had just died, and we had Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. And I think there was just this feeling that, wow, this moment, my book could speak to this moment in some ways and contribute to the conversation. And so we were wishing over the summer that my book was ready and it was coming out then. But, there's a publishing cycle. And so my book was slated to come out in February, and that's when it released. But just wanting to be a part of that conversation and then I even had people who had read early versions of it, or they had read ARCs, advanced reader copies of it. I had people saying, oh, this book is needed right now. Like, I wish it was coming out right now. And so that was that frustration, I think, last summer with that, because it was just such a difficult time for all of us, but I think particularly for Black America, it was difficult. And I work a day job, and I remember going into the job after George Floyd was killed, that later, that next day, going into work, and that was the conversation. And it was difficult to have it, because I'm the only Black person on my team, and I broke down and I cried, and talked about, because they were all in the moment then of now I want to talk about race and all race is an issue. And I remember saying to them that it is very frustrating and aggravating that it takes a white cop to kneel on the neck of a Black man for more than 8 minutes for you to recognize my humanity.
Yeah.
That's a problem, you know? And so it was just so emotional for me at the time, just being Black. Then I had this book that's dealing with race and some really difficult, you know, issues with, you know, police and all that. And then also I was asked to lead diversity, you know, be a co-lead on diversity, equity, and inclusion on my job. So I had that too, you know, so I think there's always a burden that we carry, I think, being Black in America, and particularly when these kinds of things happen, people look to us to figure it out. And I think I'm passionate about it. So I want to be a part of the conversation in figuring out where do we go from here. But I'm also reminded of what Toni Morrison, the late, great Toni Morrison said when she was asked what she would do about the race question. And she said, I can't be both the doctor and the patient.
That's deep. Yeah, but so as about your book not coming last summer, well, fortunately and unfortunately, it's not late.
No, that's right. That's the thing. That's why I said I don't want to be crass, but yeah, it's still timely, and it's, yeah, because this, yeah, it's still going on.
Yeah.
It's still timely.
All right. So one last question. We have 3 minutes. One last question. What do you consider the hardest part of the process of your first book, assuming that your second book will be easier?
The hard part was just the writing of it and trying to get representation. So that was probably, you know, I mean, writing is always going to be the hard part, you know, that's where the real work comes in. But there was a lot of time, I mean, years spent for me in trying to get literary representation, an agent. So now I don't have to worry about that. You know, I have an agent, I have a publisher. So in that sense, there's, you know, that weight is off of me and I don't need to think about that because I have that now. So that part is different. However, I think there's a different kind of pressure going into writing People of Means. And that different pressure is on your sophomore effort because, you know, there's been a lot of acclaim and people have loved The Kindest Lie. You know, it's been reviewed in the New York Times and the Washington Post and the LA Times and all these others, been in Entertainment Weekly. And so you want, at least I want the next book to live up to The Kindest Lie and hopefully exceed it and build upon what I started and the audience that I have started building. And so that's where the pressure comes in, is really the self-imposed pressure in many ways to make sure that this book, you said it's not self-imposed. Yes. Yeah, there are. Yeah, there are reader expectations. That's true. But nobody's telling me that. Nobody's saying, Nancy, you better, you know, write a book that's going to be just as good. But yeah, their readers have expectations. The critics out there, literary critics, the publishing house, yeah, also has sales expectations. And so it's a lot on the author and on me. And I have less time. I wrote the first book in 6 years. On and off. It wasn't every day for 6 years. There were months I didn't do anything. For 6 years, my next book, People of Means, is due. My first draft is due in January, as in this coming January. So yeah, a lot less time to do it in, but at least I have the support of a great team behind me. So I'm excited to, you know, to bring the next book to the world.
Well, Nancy, thank you so much for sharing all of your everything with us about The Kindest Lie today and your future endeavors. We wish you all the best with what's coming. And for everyone else, please go and register and join with the other sessions with the Dallas Literary Festival. And thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Zuri. Thank you, Sandria, and The Kindest Lie. Can't wait to hear from you guys once you've read it.